What's up, nerds? It's Zach the Goblin here. Warhammer 40k is such an amazing universe, but it has so much lore, you might be stuck on where to even start. A lot of people might want to start with the Horus Heresy, but with over 50 books, it might feel like a daunting task. That is where this series comes in. In this series, I will be explaining the plot of each Horus Heresy book. This is for people who want to get into the series, but don't have the time to invest to reading all the books, people who are jumping around the series, but maybe want some added context, or even people who just want a quick refresher. So if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to see more books explained. If we can get this video to, let's say, 50 likes, I'll do the next book in the series. So without further ado, this is the Horus Heresy Explained Quickly, Book 5, Fulgrim by Graham McNeil. The danger for most of us, Ostian Delafour would say on those rare occasions when he was coaxed to speak of his gift, is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we hit it. This book opens with two remembrancers talking on the Pride of the Emperor, the flagship of the Emperor's children. The two remembrancers are Ostian Delafour, a sculptor, and Serena De Angelis, a painter. They are getting ready for a recital put on by another remembrancer, Bekwa Kinska, and it becomes very apparent that Ostian has kind of the hots, he has the sweets for Serena, who is very obviously oblivious to it, with Ostian inwardly commenting on both her beauty as well as her skill as a painter. So they go to the recital, and much to the surprise of Ostian, it's actually really good. The blue-haired musician Bekwa swaying like a mad woman, her hands moving like dervishes across the keyboard, bringing tears to the eyes of many of those attending. The performance was then interrupted by a nobleman in the front rudely whispering to his consort, causing Bekwa to become enraged and just stop outright, saying that she doesn't play for pigs like that. And the nobleman, of course, gets mad. He's like, "Do you know who I am?" And she's like, I don't care. I am such a genius that it doesn't matter how much money you have." Everybody in the audience is upset, and it seems like she's not going to be swayed to continue playing until a powerful voice at the door to the recital chamber cut through the clamor and said, "Mistress Kinska." All heads turned at the commanding sound of the voice, and Ostian felt his pulse quicken as he saw who had stilled the crowd. Fulgrim, the Phoenician. The Primarch of the Emperor's children was the most magnificent being Ostian Delafour had ever laid eyes upon. His amethyst-colored armor shone as though fresh from the armorer's hand, its golden trims gleaming like the sun, and exquisite carvings twisted in spiral patterns on every plate of his armor. A long, scaled cloak of green emerald hung from his shoulders, a high collar of purple, and the great eagle's wings sweeping over his left shoulder, perfectly framing his pale features. Ostian longed to render Fulgrim's face in marble, knowing that the coolness of the stone was perfect for capturing the luminosity of the Primarch's skin. The wide, friendly eyes, the hint of a smile playing around his lips, and the shimmering white of his shoulder-length hair. Ostian and the remainder of the audience dropped to their knees in awe of Fulgrim's majesty, humbled by perfection that they would never come close to achieving. "If you would not play for the Marquise, would you consent to do so for me?" asked Fulgrim. Bekwa Kinska nodded, and the music began anew. So around the same time, there's a battle going on the Xenos world known as Laren, home of the Lair, an ocean world with many floating atolls made of crystal coral. This battle is taking place on one of these, named Atoll 19. We go to Solomon Demeter, captain of the second company of the Emperor's children, who is met with heavy resistance. The Lair had somehow managed to compromise their Voxnet, leading to many of the squads not being able to communicate with each other, essentially being isolated. The second company is tasked with securing a plaza, so Solomon has his second-in-command, Gaius Kafin, take his men to the right and work their way through cover towards the plaza, while Solomon recklessly charges down the center, with Gaius being like, "Sir, is that a good idea?" And Solomon just saying, "You worry too much about making the right choice, Gaius. All we need to do is make a choice, see it through, and accept the consequences." With Gaius being like, "If you say so, sir." "I do!" And so they charge, and the Lair attack. Next, we're given a little backstory. The Lair are the first species the Emperor's children have encountered since taking their leave from the Luna Wolves, and the great triumph on Ulanor, which is where Horus was named War Master by the Emperor. A terrible accident at the inception of the Emperor's children had almost destroyed them, but Fulgrim and his legion had risen, phoenix-like, which is why there's so much phoenix iconography in the Emperor's children. But due to their small numbers at this time, they had fought alongside the Luna Wolves for almost a century as Fulgrim rebuilt his shattered legion. But now that the legion had been rebuilt, the Emperor's children had embarked on crusades of their own, hungry to prove themselves. When they first encountered the Lair, they were not initially hostile to Imperial forces, but had reacted violently when one of the expedition's scout forces had been sent towards their homeworld, the Force being destroyed by a powerful alien war fleet, with Mechanicum adepts being like, their technology was capable of matching and in many cases exceeding that of the Imperium. So because of that, administrators from the Council of Terra were like, maybe we just convince them to be protectorates of the Imperium, since conquering such an advanced race would prove a long and costly endeavor. Fulgrim immediately rejected the notion, famously saying, only humanity is perfect, and for an alien race to hold its own ideals and technology as comparable to ours is profane. No, the lair deserve only extinction. And so the cleansing of Laren was begun, with Fulgrim declaring that Laren would be compliant within a month, much to the dismay of his first captain, Julius Caesaron, with him later saying, a month? He wants Laren compliant in a month? I don't doubt that we can do it, but the butcher's bill will be high. Perhaps too high, rushing to join Solomon Demeter's forces down on Laren. The battling on Laren is desperate, Solomon's second company fighting hard. He could sense that his warriors knew they were on the verge of being overwhelmed, and his anger rose. Children of the Emperor, he bellowed, marching from the crater into the lines of fighting Astartes. Hold the line! I swore in the fire to the first Captain Caesaron that we would capture this place, and we will not be shamed by failing in that oath. And with that, everybody's resolve was hardened a little bit, and Solomon knew that his warriors would not shame him. On another part of the battlefield, Marius Verosian, captain of the third company, strides through shredded carcasses of the lair, having secured the landing zones, preparing to link up with Solomon Demeter's second company. Moving out, he keeps trying to contact Solomon, but is answered with nothing but static, thinking it would be just like Solomon Demeter to have removed his helmet in the heat of battle, shaking his head. What a fool. Here, through Verosian, we learn about the Emperor's children's defining trait, striving for perfection in all things. This is a big guiding principle behind their legion as a whole. So Verosian finally makes it over to Solomon, and immediately starts chastising Solomon. Oh my god, you gotta stop going up the center. You're being reckless. So Solomon just basically being like, hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. They then look up to the sky and see hundreds of gunships descending from the upper atmosphere. Verosian being like, well, Julius Caesaron's finally here. At the same time, on the Pride of the Emperor, Ostian and Serena are watching the first assault craft launch down to the planet, Ostian remarking that he wonders what it would be like down there, an entire planet covered by an ocean, saying that he has never seen the sea before. Serena saying that, well, they just have to get down to the surface when the fighting's done. Ostian wondering if that would be allowed, and Serena being like, yeah, no, of course. We did it before on a different planet, and it was so beautiful there, expressing shame that she couldn't quite mix the correct color for the sky in her paintings. As she spoke of her failure, Ostian saw her pressing the tip of her quill into the flesh of her wrist, drawing blood. I just couldn't get it to work, she said absently. Ostian wished he knew how to stop Serena from hurting herself and to see the value in what she did. I'd like you to show me the surface of the planet if possible, he said. She blinked and smiled at him, reaching up to press her fingertips against his cheek. Fast forward and Serena has already gone back to her room. Ostian had decided to remain on the observation deck to watch the planet below. And he's sitting there being introspective, and suddenly he hears a voice in his ear. What are you looking at? And he hides his surprise and he turns around to see Bekwa Kinska standing behind him. Her blue hair pulled tight in an elaborate weave on the top of her head that Ostian guessed must have taken many hours to achieve. She smiled at him with a predator's grin. Hello, Miss Kinska, he said as neutrally as he could. Oh, please, call me Beck. All my dear friends do, said Bekwa, linking her arm through his and turning him back to face the thick glass of the observation deck. The fragrance of her scent was overpowering, and the aroma of apples caught in the back of his throat. The front of her dress was scandalously low, and Ostian found himself sweating as he felt his eyes drawn to the barely contained curve of her breasts. He looked up and saw Bekwa staring right at him, and a fierce heat built in his cheeks as he knew she must have noticed exactly where he was looking. I'm, sorry, I was... Hush, my dear. It's quite all right, soothed Bekwa, with a playful grin that reassured him not at all. No harm in it, is there? We're all grown-ups. And Ostian's just like, oh shit, I must admit that I find the prospect of war quite stirring, don't you? Gets the blood pounding and sets the loins afire with the sheer maleness of it all. Don't you find that, Ostian? I can't say I'd thought of it that way. She then goes on to describe how the thought of war essentially just makes her horny. She's like, hey, you know what I mean, right? And Ostian's like, oh, I'm not sure that I do. Don't be obtuse, Ostian. I shan't stand for it. You're a dreadful boy to tease me so. Tease you? He said. I don't know. You know exactly what I mean, said Bekwa, releasing his arm and turning on her heel to face him. I want you right here, right now. What? She continues to come on to him, and he's like, no, and he squirms away from her. He does not want any part of this. Oh, stop being such a silly boy, Ostian, she said. It's not as if I'm going to hurt you. Well, not unless you want me to. With Ostian proceeding to turn her down, because he's low-key kind of afraid of her, because she's a little freak, and also because, as previously stated, he is definitely in love with Serena. And she's like, okay, well, screw you then, I'm going home. As the battles against the lair continue, specimens of the Xeno species were collected and given to the Emperor's children apothecary, Fabius Bile. Fabius then meeting with Fulgrim, being like, hey, you know what's kind of weird about some of these organs? They've been like modified to adapt them to fulfill their role in lair society. It looks like each lair is altered from birth to perfectly achieve the purpose for which it was designed, be it warrior, a scout, a diplomat, or even an artist. They're all striving towards perfection. Wouldn't it be kind of crazy if maybe we did something similar to that? And at first Fulgrim's kind of pissed at the implication, but then he's like, maybe that's actually a good idea. Yeah, go for it, Fabius. Do what must be done. Later, Fulgrim summons a meeting with the Brotherhood of the Phoenix, which is the Emperor's Children's warrior lodge. Fulgrim being like, hey, we only have one more Xenos bastion, and then Laren is ours. It has been hard fought, and we have lost many brothers in arms. With Fulgrim saying, though some of them die, their deaths allow others to achieve perfection by taking their place. He then introduced two warriors. Fulgrim placed his hands on the shoulders of the more modest pair of them and introduced him as Captain Saul Tarvitz. And as we all know, he's one of our favorites. He then goes to stand behind the cockier of the two and introduces the other one as Lucius, a swordsman of great skill who embodies what it means to be one of the Emperor's children. Solomon measuring up both of them, liking the look of Lucius, but looking at Tarvitz and thinking that there was no greatness to the warrior and that he would never amount to much. And as we know from the previous books, his judge of Saul Tarvitz is completely wrong. Fulgrim then being like, oh yeah, and also, after we're done here, we're gonna go help my brother Ferrus Manus and his Iron Hands. They're having a little trouble and we're gonna go help them. Unfortunately, not everybody's going to take part in this campaign because Lord Eidolon is going to take a company-sized force to territories already won because the War Master has decreed that a portion of our strength must be employed there to ensure that they don't slip through our grasp. Fulgrim then leads the assault on the last atoll. The companies all converge on a temple. Fulgrim chastising First Captain Julius Caesaron because he was late. Caesaron being like, my apologies, it was much harder to get here than I thought it would be. Fulgrim just being like, we don't need any excuses. Where's Solomon? And then being like, I don't know. He hasn't answered my vox. Solomon Stormbird having been shot down on approach, crashing into the ocean. So they reach the temple and inside they find basically a big snake people orgy. The lair not even seeming to notice the entrance of Fulgrim and his Astartes. And in the middle of the snake orgy is a sword. Fulgrim zoning in on it, walking over to it, being like, whoa, what do we have here? Julius is immediately set on edge, and he's like, no, something's wrong here. But then, in his head, he hears a voice say, let him take me, Julius. Which causes Julius to forget any objections that he had. So Fulgrim, having entered this temple of worship with a big snake orgy going on, centered around this weird sword, decides, no, yeah, this is a good idea. I'm gonna pick up the sword. The sword's mine now. Sword in hand, turning to look at all the lairs sprawled around him, saying, destroy them all. Leave none of them alive. The Iron Hands had chanced upon the Diasporex by accident, actually. And they were like, oh, sick. More humans. Let's go. But then they noticed that the Diasporex had welcomed many aliens into their ranks. And they're like, ooh, well, that's not good. But in the spirit of forgiving brotherhood, Ferrus Manus had generously offered to repatriate the thousands of humans that made up the Diasporex to compliant worlds, if they would submit to the rule of the Emperor of Mankind. With the Diasporex being like, well, no, we're not going to do that. So Ferrus is like, okay, I guess it's wartime. In the Primarch's chambers aboard the battle barge, the Fist of Iron, Ferrus Manus and his first captain, Gabriel Santar, are talking about how things aren't going super well for them at the moment. And Ferrus Manus is pissed. He does not take well to failures within his own legion, with Gabriel Santar acting as kind of an anchor, cooling his Primarch's fiery temper. Ferrus Manus towered above his servants, his knotted flesh pale as though carved from the heart of a glacier. Scars crossed his skin from the wounds he had taken in battle. For the Primarch of the Iron Hands was never one to shirk from leading his warriors by example. His close-cropped hair was jet black, his eyes were glittering silver coins, and his features were battered by centuries of war. Other Primarchs might be considered beautiful creations, handsome men made godlike by their ascension to the ranks of the Astartes, but Ferrus Manus did not count himself among them. Santar's eyes were drawn, as they always were, to the gleaming silver forearms of his Primarch. The flesh of his arms arms and hands shimmered and rippled as though formed from liquid mercury that had flowed into the shape of mighty hands and somehow been trapped in that form forever. Later, Ferrus Manus is telling his men of word from his brother Primarchs, telling them that the Imperial Fists of Rogel Dorn have been summoned back to Terra to act as guardians of the Imperial Palace. Leman Russ and the Space Wolves are racking up more and more victories every day. And then one of his men asks, "Any word of the Emperor's children?" And Ferrus Manus is super stoked to talk about his favorite brother. Yeah, he's actually coming here right now to help us. And all his men cheer. The brotherhood shared by Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus was well known. In their first meeting, they had a competition to see who could forge the perfect weapon, with Ferrus Manus making a golden-bladed sword that forever burned with the fire of the forge, and Fulgrim having forged an exquisite warhammer that could level a mountain with a single blow. Both of them being like, "No, yeah, yours is better." And after hyping each other up, they both swapped weapons, sealing their eternal friendship. Now we go back to the Emperor's children, and Solomon is stuck in the medical bay, still recovering from his Stormbird crashing into the ocean during the final attack on the lair. And First Captain Julius Caesaron comes to visit him. He's like, "Hey, I know you didn't make it to the temple, but let me tell you, it was a little freaky in there." Solomon being like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, it was just like unnatural. I don't know, but it was so weird. I had to go back. I went back with the remembrancers because I had to see it again." Solomon asking, "Oh, what did Marius make of it?" He actually never saw it. By the time the Third Company made it there, the battle was already done. Solomon, knowing that would be causing Marius anguish, knowing that he reached the end of the battlefield after victory had already been won. So he's like, "Whoa, shit, how's he doing?" Julius saying, "Oh, he's doing good. He and his warriors were shamed, but Fulgrim forgave him." Solomon's like, "Forgave him?" From what I hear, the Southern Spur was the most heavily defended part of the atoll. There was never any chance that he was going to reach Fulgrim in time. With Julius saying, "Yeah, me and you both know that, but try telling Marius." He thinks they should have found a way to overcome impossible odds, so they both decide they should keep an eye on him. When the Emperor's children finally meet up with the Iron Hands, Fulgrim and some of his men await Ferrus Manus on the embarkation deck. Fulgrim having the golden sword forged by Ferrus Manus, Fireblade, belted at his waist. Julius Caesaron seeing the Primarch of the Iron Hands emerge. His first impression of Ferrus Manus was of sheer bulk. The Primarch of the Iron Hands was a brutally rugged giant. His width and height quite unimaginable next to Fulgrim's slender frame. His armor shone like the darkest onyx, the gauntlet upon his shoulder fastened from beaten iron, and a cloak of glittering mail billowed behind him as he marched. A monstrous hammer was slung across his back, and Julius knew that this was the dreaded Forgebreaker, the weapon Fulgrim had forged for his brother. Ferrus Manus wore no helmet, and his battered face was like a slab of granite, scarred from the ravages of 2 centuries of war among the stars. As he caught sight of his brother Primarch, his stern face broke apart in a warm grin of welcome, the sudden change almost unbelievable in the completeness of its reversal. Julius risked a glance at Fulgrim, seeing the grin mirrored in his own Primarch's face, and before he knew it, he too was smiling like a simpleton. To see such honest brotherhood between these two incredible, godlike warriors made his heart sing. And then they go and embrace, and they're both just like, "Ooh, I missed you so much. We're such good brothers. We're such good friends," right? As a quick aside, I really like the excerpt before because it exemplifies how Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus are opposites, but they're closer than any of the other brothers. And the fact that they're wearing the weapons that they each forged for each other, I think goes a long way to showing how much they actually really care about each other. While not unheard of, is actually quite rare among the Primarchs. So then they discuss how they're actually going to beat the Diasporex, and later in Fulgrim's chamber, the two Primarchs talk about a lot of things, such as Ferrus Manus thinking that the Emperor's children's fascination with art is a waste of time, and Fulgrim saying, "No, it's not." Them talking about Horus being the War Master, and Ferrus is like, "Yeah, no, he definitely earned it." And Fulgrim kind of goads him, being like, "Oh, spoken like a true follower." Ferrus is like, "The fuck?" Fulgrim's like, "Well, isn't there somewhere in your heart that you wish that the Emperor would have named you War Master?" With Ferrus Manus just shaking his head emphatically, "No, not at all. I can honestly say that I didn't." Could you imagine all that responsibility? Fulgrim saying, "So you don't think Horus is up to it?" Ferrus saying, "No, not at all. I think if any of us can be War Master, I'd expect it to be Horus." So they drink to that. But then a voice in Fulgrim's head says, "He is a sycophant and easily swayed." Aboard the Andronius, Eidolon had given a secret research facility to Fabius Bile. Upset that he was being sent away on a peacekeeping mission, he is supporting Fabius's research into enhancing the physiology of Astartes, saying that upon his return, Fabius will start his enhancements with him, saying that he will become his greatest success, faster, stronger, and more deadly than ever before. He wants to make himself indispensable to the Primarch. Primarch. Serena DeAngelis is in her studio, having returned from the temple on the surface of Laren, infuriated that she just can't seem to create the red of the sunset she had seen. Remembering the fever dream that was her time at the temple on Lair, she takes a small knife and cuts into the soft flesh above her elbow, letting droplets of blood fall onto the palette beneath it. Now she could begin painting. Solomon and Marius are dueling in the practice cages. Solomon asking Marius if he's heard the news, that they were going to be issued some new chemical stimulant for testing, with Marius being like, oh yeah, the Primarch believes it's going to make us like stronger and faster, and Solomon being like, aren't you a little worried? No, it came from the Primarch. No, I mean the drug. It hasn't come from Terra or anything. It came from some of Fabius's weird experiments. With Marius laughing and saying, all the genetic enhancements done to your flesh in the laboratory, and you choose now to worry about chemicals in your body? With Solomon being like, no, it's different. I don't know. I just don't like it. Marius winning their duel, but saying, hey, Solomon, you're getting stronger every day. Solomon saying, yeah, one of these days I'm gonna beat you. Marius just saying, no, you won't. I've been training harder than ever before, and with this new chemical, I'll be even faster and stronger. Solomon seeing the desperation in his eyes, his yearning to atone for his failure on Laren. Solomon saying, hey, look, you didn't fail. Marius saying, no, it was a failure. You were lucky to have been shot down before you got there. Solomon getting angry, lucky? What the fuck you mean? I almost died. And Marius being emo saying, it would have been easier if I had died. So Marius is obviously still really broken up about his perceived failing of the Primarch, saying that he will ensure that his company follows the Primarch's orders without question, no matter what they are. We then cut to Fulgrim, who is fuming in his room. One of the Iron Hand's scout ships had decided to act alone, had discovered the Diasparex's solar collectors, with Ferrus Manus ordering his expedition to make all speed in response, with no regard to Fulgrim's plans, with a voice in Fulgrim's head saying that the plan had been perfect and Ferrus was ruining everything. Fulgrim listening to a phonocaster that played the music recorded within the Lair temple, the music reaching deep inside him, musing over the great works of art that had been created by the Remembrancers that were allowed to visit Laren. Bekwa Kinska saying that she was going to write something in Fulgrim's honor, and the greatest of these works was a mighty picture of him, a piece that he had commissioned from Serena DeAngelis, a work so full of vibrancy and emotion that it made his heart ache to see such beauty. Then he looks over at a pile of smashed marble that had been his attempt to create a thing of beauty, remembering that each line was perfect, and yet there was something indefinably wrong with the sculpture, something that eluded his understanding, which had led him to violently reduce it to rubble, thinking perhaps Ostian Delafor could instruct him as to what mistakes he was making, even though it galled him that he, as a Primarch, should have to consult a mortal. His thoughts then returned to his anger towards his brother, with the voice in his head saying, he shames you with this display and must be punished. When the Emperor's children finally caught up with the Iron Hands and the Diasparex, Fulgrim, along with some of his elite warriors, including Solomon Demeter, Julius Caesaron, and Gaius Caphan, entered boarding torpedoes to shoot themselves inside the enemy's command ship, the different groups then fighting towards the command bridge. Along the way, Julius Caesaron seeing one of his friends die, and as he looked into his friend's dead eyes, he felt the loss and guilt churning within him as he realized that, as much as he would miss his friend, he reveled in the sensation his death had stirred within him. He mused that his experience at the Lair temple had awakened something within him, allowing him to reach such dizzying heights of experience. Whatever the reason, Julius was glad of it. Solomon Demeter being the first to reach the command bridge, capturing it before Fulgrim and Julius could reach him. Fulgrim is pissed that Solomon got there first. He feels that his moment was stolen from him, his inner voice saying, now it is ruined, first by Ferrus Manus, and then by Solomon Demeter. With Fulgrim shouting no, Solomon Demeter fought with courage to win the honor of reaching the bridge. He hungers for glory that ought to be yours. Fulgrim saying, no, I can't believe it. It is the truth, Fulgrim, and you know it. In your heart of hearts, you know it. We are now introduced to Eldrad Ulthrin, an Eldar Farseer, and a very important character for the setting. And quick aside for those who don't know, Eldar are essentially just space elves. Eldrad sees the future horrors that the Horus Heresy is going to commit upon the galaxy. He sees the future fall of Horus that gives Chaos the opportunity to corrupt him. In his visions, he hears cries of anguish echoed all around him. Crusade, hero, savior, destroyer. But above them all, blazing brighter than all the others, War Master. The Emperor's children had now taken their leave of the Iron Hands, continuing to a region of space known as the Perdis Anomaly. Eidolon, Saul Tarvitz, and Lucius had finally returned to the fleet. Saul Tarvitz being wary and glad to be back amongst his brothers, for his experience on murder had been a draining one, which was outlined in previous books. Remembering fondly when Tarek Turgotten had put Eidolon in his place, even though Tarvitz was honor-bound to serve Eidolon Eidolon, he couldn't deny the satisfaction he had felt. Lucius had come back changed as well. A duel in the training cages with Garviel Loken had given him a much-needed lesson in humility and seen his nose broken. The bone had not properly set, and Lucius's perfect profile was, in his eyes, forever ruined. Eidolon then told a story of what happened on Murder, embellishing a little bit, making himself seem a lot more important, reinventing the events that took place there, much to Tarvitz's surprise. Later, Lucius telling Tarvitz, "That's like the Lord Commander to put a spin on what happened on Murder, right?" With Tarvitz saying, "It was certainly a interesting take on events." With Lucius saying, "Who cares anyways? If there's glory to be had, it's better that we got it than those damn lunar wolves." Tarvitz saying, "You're just mad that Loken beat you at the training cages." With Lucius vowing to beat him next time they fought. Solomon Demeter then coming over and being like, "Hey Tarvitz, I was watching you as Eidolon told his tale, and I get the feeling there might be more to it than what I heard. I'd like to hear your version of what happened, if you take my meaning." He described our campaign as he perceived it, Tarvitz said neutrally, with Solomon saying, "Come on, Saul. You don't mind if I call you Saul, do you? You can be honest with me. You and I both know that Eidolon's a blowhard, so tell me what really happened." Lucius interrupting angrily, and Solomon dressing him down real hard, saying that, "When I first saw you, I thought you had the makings of a captain and a fine warrior. I can see now that I was definitely wrong in that." And then proceeding to lecture him a little bit. When Lucius leaves, Tarvitz tries to hide his smile and says, "You won't forget this, you know." Solomon saying, "Good. Hey, maybe he'll even learn from it." With Tarvitz countering, "I wouldn't count on it. He's not a fast learner." We then cut to Ostian in his studio, chiseling away at the statue that was slowly coming to life, when all of a sudden, Fulgrim and his Phoenix Guard enter his studio, much to the surprise of the stunned Ostian, who dropped to his knees and bowed his head, with Fulgrim asking him to stand, saying, "Genius such as yours need never kneel before me," and looking over at the emerging statues saying, "Oh, I see your work progresses. So what warrior is the statue going to represent?" With Ostian saying, "The Emperor, beloved by all," and Fulgrim saying, "Oh, the Emperor, what a fine subject." With Ostian agreeing, "I thought it fitting, given the perfection of the marble." Fulgrim continuing to hype him up, and then finally getting to what he came there for and saying, "So I would like your help, Ostian," and showed him some of his works, explaining that he had set out to sculpt the likeness of each of his captains, but something was just missing, some essential truth. And Ostian looking it over and saying that, yeah, everything was perfect, but he just felt no passion stirring within him that he would expect to feel from great art. They were actually just too perfect, and that was their flaw. Eventually, he just tells Fulgrim, "They're wonderful," and Fulgrim's like, "Don't lie to me," with Ostian hearing a curtness in his words. "What would you have me say, my lord? They are perfect." "I would have the truth," said Fulgrim, with Ostian finally relenting and saying, "It's as if they are too perfect, as though they had been carved with the head rather than the heart." With Fulgrim saying, "Can it even be possible for something to be too perfect? Surely everything that is beautiful and noble is a product of reason and calculation." With Ostian saying, "Great art isn't about reason, it's about what comes from the heart. You can work with all the technical perfection in the galaxy, but if there's no passion, then it's wasted effort." With Ostian continuing on saying that you can never actually reach perfection, and saying that if he were to await perfection, his work would never be finished. With Fulgrim finally being angry and saying, "Well, you are the expert." Ostian then realizing that, oh shit, I kind of went a little too far here, whispering, "My lord." Fulgrim saying, "No, it's okay. I see that I was right to have come to you. I shall never lay chisel to marble again, for I am clearly wasting my time," before storming out in a huff. Now that Eidolon has returned, Fabius Bile is about to operate on him, improve upon him. As the powerful sporific drugs enter Eidolon's system, he is horrified to learn that he is being implanted with Xenos organs, with Fabius saying, "It's too late to back out now. You demanded this of me, and Fulgrim has already authorized my work. What was it that you wanted? Oh yeah, to be my greatest success, faster, stronger, and more deadly than ever." And with that, the scalpels descended. The fleet then finds several idyllic worlds. Fulgrim, being moved by their beauty, declares that they should be left untouched, with Solomon expressing, "Isn't this against our mission?" Fulgrim being angry and saying, "I know our mission, Captain Demeter. You should not presume that I do not." With Solomon being like, No, you don't understand. It just seems that leaving this world unoccupied would be contrary to the word of the Emperor." With Julius agreeing with Fulgrim and Saul Tarvitz agreeing with Solomon. In total, 6 of these worlds were found. During this time, Solomon and Tarvitz have become pretty good friends. Solomon second-guessing his initial assessment of the man, seeing the seed of greatness within him. Saul Tarvitz could be a great leader of men, given the chance, which from the previous books we know is quite true. Later, Solomon and Lord Commander Vespasian are discussing the changes in the Legion. Solomon saying that he's pretty sure that it was after the Laren campaign when things started to change, with Vespasian agreeing. Solomon continuing to bemused that maybe there's some unknown power of the temple that are corrupting the Legion. Vespasian is skeptical, but then Solomon asks if he's seen what they've done to La Fenice. La Fenice is a section of the ship that has been given over to the Remembrancers and the artists. Solomon continuing, saying that it's like La Fenice has become a replica of the Lair Temple, with Vespasian asking why would Lord Fulgrim replicate an alien temple, with Solomon saying why don't you ask him? You are a Lord Commander after all, with Vespasian agreeing that maybe he should. So now Serena de Angelis is fully on the verge of crashing out. She finds that her blood just isn't enough. It's not vibrant enough for her paintings. She needs something more. She then seeks out and lures another Remembrancer back to her studio. After some talking, Serena leaned forwards and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him in for a passionate kiss. He was stiff in her arms for a moment, startled by the sudden move, but slowly relaxed into the kiss. He put his hands on her hips as she eased herself into the curve of his body. They stood locked together for as long as she could bear it, before she dragged him to the floor, where she tore at his clothes in a frenzy, scattering paint and overturning her easels. The sensation of his hands on her body was repulsive, but even that made her want to cry with pleasure. At one point he broke the kiss, blood dripping from his lip where she had bitten it. A look of bemused concern plastered across his idiot features. She pulled him tight to her body and rolled on top of him as they coupled like wild animals in the wreckage of her studio. At last his eyes widened and his hips spasmed. She reached down to the floor to snatch up her sharpened palette knife. What? Was all he managed before she slashed the blade across his throat. His blood sprayed in an arcing jet as he thrashed in his death throes. Sticky red fluid covered her as he convulsed, and this time she laughed at the wash of sensation that flooded her body. He gurgled beneath her as his lifeblood pumped out of him, and his hands clawed at her in desperation. Blood pooled in a vast lake beneath him, and Serena stabbed her knife into his neck again and again. His struggles grew weaker and weaker, while her pleasure heightened to an explosive climax. After he had fully died, her first thoughts were, what wonders might she work upon the canvas with such materials? So yeah, you can say she's fully crashed out at this point. Ostian later goes to check in on her, and he is horrified by what he sees. Everything is a wreck, and it smells rotten in there. She is begging him to leave because she's like, I don't know what I'm going to do if you stay here. But Ostian's just like, oh, it's all right, Serena. With her saying she doesn't want any help. She just wants to be left alone. With Ostian just being confused, saying, I don't know what's going on, Serena, but it's not too late. Let me help you. With Serena yelling at him, being like, you don't understand. You're a genius. You've always been a genius. Things just come easy to you. You don't understand what it's like for the rest of us. So then he gets mad because he's like, I work every day to be as good as I am. And it annoys the hell out of me when mediocre people assume an air of knowing better than I do what makes good art. Appreciation of others' work is a wonderful thing, Serena. It makes what is excellent in others belong to you as well. At that moment, realizing that he let his anger get the best of him, and he storms away in frustration at himself, with her wailing at him to come back, and that she's sorry and that she needs his help, but he doesn't hear it, so he just continues on. On the 13th day after the expedition's arrival in the Perdis region, they are greeted by a vast ship, welcomed by Eldrad Uthran, who wants to speak to Fulgrim. So Fulgrim, along with a contingent of Emperor's children Astartes, go down to the planet of Tarsus. Eldrad and his group meeting them there. And Eldrad basically lays it all out to Fulgrim, saying, hey, Horus is injured. He's dying right now. He's not gonna die, unfortunately. But as we speak, the powers of chaos whisper lies wrapped in truth into his ears. Horus is going to betray you all. In one fell swoop, he will condemn the galaxy to thousands of years of war and suffering. And Fulgrim doesn't like hearing any of this, with the voice in his head roaring in anger. This Xenos filth means to sow the seeds of dissent among you. Fulgrim then saying, this is madness. Why would Horus even do this? That's crazy. With Eldrad saying his soul is being tempted with visions of power and glory by the gods of chaos. This is a battle he's not going to win. Lies, 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 screams the voice in Fulgrim's head. Gods of chaos, what are you, crazy? Eldrad being horrified. He's like, wait, you travel the warp and you don't know about chaos? He's like, yo, you gotta listen. The warp is where chaos resides. Like, there's bad shit in there. If you don't know about it, you can be corrupted. Like, it's the mortal enemy of all living things. Fulgrim saying that Horus will turn away from such evil. Obviously, he's the War Master. The voice in his head still screaming at him. Kill him! He will infect you with lies! Kill him! It was about that moment that Eldrad realized that the sword that Fulgrim was carrying, the sword from the Lair Temple, contained a chaos demon and was obviously corrupting Fulgrim. So realizing that it is too late, Eldrad turns to his people and is like, hey, they're all corrupted already. We just gotta kill them. He then turns to Fulgrim and says, I tried to save you, but you were already an unwitting tool of chaos. Eldrad then teleports away and fighting ensues. So a bunch of fighting ensues and the Emperor's children eventually win. Throughout the battle, Fulgrim's sword corrupting him more and more, with a name forming in Fulgrim's thoughts. Slanesh. Slanesh, Slanesh. After the battle concludes, Fulgrim orders that they return to the Pride of the Emperor, and orders that every one of these idyllic worlds shall be bombarded by virus bombs. By the fire, I swear that every one of the Eldar worlds will burn. Orman Braxton, a high-ranking emissary of the administration of Terra, is waiting outside of Fulgrim's chambers. When he finally enters, he is met with deafening music, as well as paintings of all manner of vileness, some depicting acts of violent barbarity, and others of unspeakably vile conduct that was beyond pornography. As he approached the central stateroom, he heard arguing voices. As he gets close, he says, "My Lord Fulgrim, are you there?" And suddenly the voices stop, Fulgrim telling him to enter. The stateroom was a mess. The odor of uneaten food hung heavy in the air, and not even the perfumed oils could mask the stench of rotten meat. Fulgrim was naked but for a purple loincloth. His flesh was like hard marble, pale and veined with dark lines, and his face had a manic look to it, like that of a man in the grip of a chemical stimulant. Fulgrim being like, "Hey, Braxton, what's going on? Nice of you to come by. Hey, before we talk about business, can you do me a favor?" And steers him over to the canvas in the corner. "What do you think about this? The likeness is quite uncanny, isn't it?" With Braxton staring in open-mouthed horror at the image slathered on the canvas. A truly repellent portrait of an armored warrior, thickly painted with all manner of garish colors, crude brushstrokes, and loathsome stench. The subject was none other than the Primarch of the Emperor's children. Though he was no student of art, even Braxton recognized this as a vulgar atrocity, an affront to the being it purported to represent. And he looks over at Fulgrim and being like, "This is a joke, right?" Fulgrim's just like, "Oh, yes, you're lost for words, I see. I'm not surprised. It is, after all, by Serena DeAngelis, and only recently finished. You were honored to see it before its public unveiling." And Braxton just kind of nods his head, a little too afraid to say anything wrong. Finally being like, "My lord, if I may." Fulgrim being like, "Oh yeah, what news from Terra do you have?" He says firstly he brings word of Lord Magnus of Prospero. Apparently he didn't listen to the dictates of the Council of Nicaea, and has continued his researches into the mysteries of the Immaterium. Fulgrim saying, "Yeah, I figured that would happen. He does love his mysteries." Braxton then informing him that the Wolves of Fenris had been dispatched to bring Magnus back to Terra. And Fulgrim starts to get mad. Then what? Is Magnus supposed to be charged with a crime? And Braxton just being like, "Hey, I don't know, that's just what I'm told, okay?" Braxton then talks about Horus being in a war with the Aretian technocracy. But what is concerning is that they have received some unsettling reports that Horus was grievously wounded on Davin, as some of his warriors were overzealous when bringing him back aboard the Vengeful Spirit and massacred a bunch of Imperial citizens. He then informs Fulgrim that the Council of Terra wishes that he travels to meet with the War Master to ensure that the principles that underpin the Great Crusade are being adhered to. Fulgrim angrily agrees, so Braxton takes his leave. As he left, he could hear voices arguing. He risked a glance over his shoulder in an attempt to identify with whom Fulgrim spoke. He felt a shiver travel the length of his spine as he saw that Fulgrim was alone. He was speaking to the painting. Lucius comes upon Serena, who had just killed another person, questioning her. She then lies to him, saying that she was defending herself, with Lucius just being like, "Oh, okay, yeah, cool. He got what he deserved then." She felt exhilaration lying to a warrior who could snap her neck with his fingers, unthinkingly reaching up and slicing her blade across her cheek, drawing a thin line of blood from her pallid skin, with Lucius impassively asking why she did that. Serena saying so she doesn't forget what happened, handing him the knife, showing him the many scars that she has made on herself, saying that pain is her way of remembering all that has gone before. If she holds on to the pain, then she will never allow it to be forgotten. Lucius nodding and reaching up to touch his crooked nose. Serena then goading him on. Lucius gripped the knife tightly, and she lifted his unresisting hand to his face, and she said, "Yes, your perfect face is already gone. Do it." And he nods and cuts himself across the cheek, so he will never forget Loken. Fulgrim is pacing in front of the painting of himself, saying, "No, a horse can never betray the Emperor," with the painting speaking back, what if he is? And if so, where do you stand? With the Emperor or with Horus? So Fulgrim is off the deep end at this point. He is just full-blown arguing with a painting of himself. Obviously, the voice in the painting is the same as the voice in his head and is coming from the demon sword. Fulgrim clenched his jaw and aimed his sword at the image of himself on the canvas. "I will not believe you," he shouted. "You cannot know these things." "But I do." "How?" begged Fulgrim. "You are not me. You cannot be me." "No," agreed his twin. "I am not. Call me the spirit of perfection that will guide you in the coming days." "Horus seeks a war with the Emperor?" asked Fulgrim, almost unable to speak the words, such was the horror that they represented. "He does not seek it, but it is forced upon him. The Emperor plans to abandon you all, Fulgrim. His perfection is not but a sham. He has used you all to conquer the galaxy for him, and now he seeks to ascend to godhood on the blood
blood that you have shed.
No, cried Fulgrim. I won't believe this. The Emperor's human intelligence raised above all error and imperfection and extended to all possible truth.
Your belief is irrelevant. It is already happening. Grand things are necessarily obscure to weak men. That which can be made explicit to the idiot is not worth my care. If Horus can see this, how is it that you, the most perfect of Primarchs, cannot?
Because you are lying, bellowed Fulgrim, smashing his fist into one of the green marble pillars that supported the domed roof of his staterooms. Powdered stone exploded from the column, and it collapsed in a cracked pile of splintered rock.
You waste your time in denial, Fulgrim. You are already on the road of joining your brother.
I will support Horus in all things, gasped Fulgrim, but turn against the Emperor. That is too far.
You will never know what is too far until you go beyond it. I know you, Fulgrim, and have tasted the forbidden desires that you hold chained within the deepest, darkest recesses of your soul. Better to murder an infant in its cradle than nurse an unacted upon desire.
No, said Fulgrim, raising his bloody hand to his temple. I won't listen to you.
Expose yourself to your deepest fear, Fulgrim. After that, fear has no power, and the fear of freedom shrinks and vanishes. You will be free.
Free? Cried Fulgrim. Betrayal is not freedom, it is damnation.
Damnation, no. It is liberty and unfettered freedom to explore all that is and all that can be. Horus has seen beyond the veil of this mortal flesh you call life and learnt the truth of your existence. He is privy to the secrets of the ancients, and only he can help you towards perfection.
Perfection? Whispered Fulgrim.
Yes, perfection. The Emperor is imperfect. For if he were perfect, then such things could not happen. Perfection is slow death. Only change is constant. The signal for rebirth. The egg of the phoenix from which you arise. Ask yourself this. What is it you fear?
Fulgrim stared into the eyes of the portrait. Eyes that were his own, but for the awful knowledge within them. With a clarity born of perfect understanding, Fulgrim knew the answer to the question his reflection had posed him. My fear is to fail. The Emperor's children then travel to where the Sons of Horus are, and Fulgrim meets with the War Master on the Vengeful Spirit. Horus wondering why Fulgrim was there, and Fulgrim being like, yeah, I heard some reports of brutality, but like, hey, I don't really care. I know war's messy. War's cruel. Don't even worry about it. With Horus being like, oh yeah, that's true, sick. But actually, I have some things to talk about that might interest you. So they're talking, and Horus is talking about how he's giving Angron what he wants. Blood. Fulgrim thinking that Angron probably holds more loyalty to Horus now than the Emperor. And as he's talking, he notices that Erebus, a word-bearer's chaplain, is enraptured by everything that Horus says, and also muses that he wonders who laid first claim to the loyalties of the word-bearer's Primarch. Fulgrim finally asking, yo, so who's this dude anyways? Why is he here in our private conversation? And Horus is just like, that's Erebus, don't worry about him. He's an advisor to me, a valued counselor, if you will. Horus and Erebus then spoke to Fulgrim for 3 days, telling him everything that had happened since Davin. Horus finally saying, the Emperor has lied to us, Fulgrim, telling Fulgrim that the Emperor means to abandon all of them and ascend to godhood. The whole time the sword egging Fulgrim on to join Horus. He then shows Fulgrim papers of the Lectitio Divinitatis, using it as proof to show that the Emperor is propagating himself as a god. Fulgrim's whole world is shattered around him. His love for the Emperor torn from his breast and held up for the dirty, useless thing it was. Horus came to him and cupped his face in his hands, staring into his eyes with an intensity that was almost fanatical. I need you, my brother, pleaded Horus. I cannot do this without you, but you must do nothing against your conscience. My brother, my phoenix, my hope. Wing your way through the darkness and defy fortune's spite. Revive from the ashes and rise. Fulgrim met his brother's stare. What would you have me do? It cuts to Solomon Demeter and his company fighting a bunch of orcs. They were supposed to get reinforcement squads from the 1st and 3rd companies, but it's becoming increasingly obvious that Julius and Marius are not coming to his aid. It looked like all hope was lost, but at the last moment, a group of Emperor's children came to rescue them from certain doom. But much to Solomon's surprise, it wasn't the 1st or 3rd company, but Sultan Tarvitz and Lucius who came to help, and it was mostly just luck. They just happened to hear the request for support, so it seems that Solomon and his company were left for dead. Later, Lord Commander Vespasian is confronting Fulgrim about this. Vespasian asking, "My lord, why were Captains Verosian and Caesarion held back from supporting Captain Demeter? If it wasn't for Tarvitz and Lucius, Solomon's men would all be dead." "Tarvitz and Lucius saved Captain Demeter?" asked Fulgrim, and Vespasian was shocked to see a hint of annoyance on the surface of Fulgrim's face. How courageous of them, with Vespasian being like, yeah, well, they shouldn't have had to do that, right? Julius and Marius were supposed to support the second, but they were held back. Why? Fulgrim being like, "Are you questioning me? Do you dare suggest that you know better than me or the War Master?" Fulgrim then guides Vespasian over to the painting of himself, which obviously horrifies him. The painting tries to corrupt him, but as it realizes that it can't, it just tells Fulgrim to kill him. So he did, driving his blade down through Vespasian's spine. Fulgrim then announces to a gathering of all the Emperor's children that the Legion will be divided again, a small force and Fulgrim himself going to join Ferrus Manus and his Iron Hands, and the rest going with Lord Commander Eidolon to rendezvous with the War Master at the Istvan system. We then cut to Ferrus Manus and Gabriel Santar in the Anvilarium of the Fist of Iron. Ferrus Manus telling Santar that he's actually really excited to see his brother again. Ferrus is worried because he noticed a little change in his brother the last time they saw each other. So while he is surprised that Fulgrim is coming to meet him, he's still excited nonetheless. The great black iron gates of the Anvilarium swung open, and Fulgrim marched towards them with his flowing, fur-lined cape billowing in the heated gust of air from the forges below. He came with Julius Caesarion in his Terminator armor, and a full 10 of the Phoenix Guard. The two Primarchs embrace, expressing how much of a joy it is to see each other. Fulgrim telling Ferrus that he has a lot to talk about, and it concerns the very future of the Great Crusade. So suddenly serious, Ferrus nods and suggests that they go talk privately in the Iron Forge. So they kind of go back and forth talking about their shared history, with Ferrus eventually being like, "Okay, so you didn't come here to just talk about old times. What's going on?" Fulgrim asking when he last saw the Emperor, and Ferrus being like, "I don't know, a long time ago, I guess." With Fulgrim saying, "Well, I saw him last in Ulanor at the War Master's coronation." With Fulgrim expressing that in that moment, it felt like the Emperor was abandoning them all. Ferrus saying that he doesn't really like what Fulgrim is implying. Fulgrim telling him that Horus told him the truth of how the Emperor was betraying them all and was seeking godhood. Ferrus Manus just being like, "Yo, you tweaking, dude." With horror, "This is the new direction of the crusade you spoke of?" Fulgrim being like, "Yeah, dude. Sick, isn't it? It will be a glorious age of perfection, my brother. What we have won is already being given away to imperfect mortals who will waste the glories we won for them. What we have earned in blood and tears will be ours again. Can't you see that?"
"All I see is betrayal, Fulgrim," roared Ferrus Manus. "You were not talking about claiming back what we have won. You were talking about betraying everything we stand for."
"My brother," implored Fulgrim, "please, you must listen to me. The Mechanicum has already pledged its support to the War Master, as have many of our brothers. War is coming. War that will engulf this galaxy in flames. When it is over, there will be no mercy for those on the wrong side." He saw the color flood back into his brother's face, a raw and bellicose red that he knew all too well. "Ferrus, I beg you, for the sake of our brotherhood, to join us."
"Brotherhood?" bellowed Ferrus. "Our brotherhood died when you decided to turn traitor."
Fulgrim backed away from his brother as he saw the murderous intent in his blazing silver eyes. "Lorgar and Angron are ready to strike, and Mortarion will soon be with us. You must join me, or you will be destroyed."
"No,"
snarled Ferrus Manus, hefting Forgebreaker to his shoulder.
"It is you who will be destroyed."
"Ferrus, no!" pleaded Fulgrim. "Think about this. Would I come to you like this if I did not believe that it is the right thing to do?"
"I don't know what happened to you, Fulgrim, but this is treachery, and there is only one fate for traitors."
"So, you are going to kill me?" Ferrus hesitated, and Fulgrim saw his shoulders sag in despair. "I am your sworn honor brother, and I swear to you that I do not lie," pressed Fulgrim, hoping that there was still a chance to convince his brother not to act in haste.
"I know you're not lying, Fulgrim," said Ferrus sadly, "and that's why you have to die."
And so they fight, Fulgrim still trying to convince his brother the entire time, but Ferrus not hearing any of it. Fulgrim scoring a line across Ferrus's cheek, causing him to back away, blinded for just an instant. Fulgrim taking this chance to smash his fist repeatedly into Ferrus's face, and as Ferrus stumbled, Fulgrim closed and swung his sword for Ferris's neck, but instead of trying to block, Ferris dropped his hammer and caught the descending blade with his molten silver hands.
I forged this blade, hissed Ferris, and I can break it too.
No sooner had the words left his mouth than Fireblade exploded in a bright flare of molten metal. Both Primarchs were hurled from their feet by the force of the blast. Fulgrim got to his feet first and grabbed Forgebreaker, raising it over his head, ready to deliver the death blow. But Fulgrim just can't do it. You are my brother, Ferris. I would have walked on to death with you. Why could you not have done the same for me?
You are not my brother, spat Ferris through the blood of his ruined face.
I will always be your brother, said Fulgrim, and swung the hammer in an upward arc that connected thunderously with Ferris's jaw. Fulgrim then rushes back to the Anvilarium. Behind him, Ferris Manus lay broken, but still alive. As soon as Fulgrim enters the Anvilarium, Julius turns and shouts, Phoenician! And instantly the warriors of the Phoenix Guard swung their blades, beheading the Iron Hand's honor guard, with Julius stabbing his Terminator claws into the chest of Gabriel Santar. They then teleport back to the Pride of the Emperor and open fire on the Iron Hand's ships. We then cut over to Solomon Demeter on Ishvan III. At this point, Saul Tarvitz had already warned everybody of the betrayal, and the surface had already been virus bombed, and they had been fighting back against the traitors for over a month. He hoped that Nathaniel Garros Eisenstein could escape this trap and take word of the War Master's treachery to the Emperor. That hope was all that kept the warriors going at this point. Lucius then heard sounds come from ahead, and he rushes over to see Lucius fighting a group of traitor Emperor's children. Lucius yelling to Solomon that they're breaking in, with Solomon saying, not while I have my strength they won't, and he rushes to go help Lucius, with Lucius yelling, kill them all. We cut to an angry Horus yelling at Fulgrim. You dare to return to me in failure? You swore to me that you could sway him. The Iron Hands were essential to my plans. With Fulgrim being like, well, what do you want from me? I couldn't convince him. Would you have had me kill our brother, War Master? With Horus being like, well, yeah, that's better than having him survive and fight against us. Duh. With Fulgrim saying that, well, okay, if we're done here, I'm gonna go back to my legion. And Horus being like, no, actually, you're not. I have another task for you. I'm sending you to Ishvan V. Fulgrim says, why not send Perturabo or something? This is kind of more like his thing anyways. With Horus just saying, well, because I'm sending you, not him. The War Master then uses flattery to get Fulgrim to do what he wants. The Ishvan V phase of my plan is the most crucial, said Horus, and Fulgrim could feel the War Master's diplomatic skills coming to the fore as the dangerous embers of his ego were fanned. Even more so than what is happening below us. I can entrust it to no other. You must go to Ishvan V, my brother. All depends on your success. Fulgrim let the violent potential crackling between them continue for a long, frightening moment before laughing. And now you flatter me, hoping my ego will coerce me into obeying your orders? Is it working? Asked Horus. Yes, admitted Fulgrim. Very well. The War Master's will be done. I will go to Ishvan V. We cut to Solomon and Lucius, who had just finished off the last of the traitor Emperor's children, with Lucius being like, yeah, we did it, Captain Demeter. I couldn't have done it without you. Solomon looking up at the tone and being like, that's weird. Also, it's weird that they came with so few warriors. What did they think they were going to gain? And Lucius says, nothing. Yet. A gut-wrenching suspicion formed in Solomon's mind. Oh no, whispered Solomon, as he realized that they were around 30 corpses. He gazed at the battered armored plates, the blackened faces, and the damage that told him that these warriors had not come fresh from their billets to attack the palace, but had been here all along. These dead warriors were not traitors at all. They were loyalists, he whispered. I'm afraid so, said Lucius. And then he said, I'm actually really lucky that you got here when you did, because I don't think I could have killed them all on my own. Solomon then rushes towards Lucius and starts choking him. But Lucius just stabs into his stomach, tearing upwards through his chest. Falling to his knees, his blood and life pouring from his body in a hot rush.
You will not win,
he gasped. Lucius just shrugged. Maybe, maybe not, but you won't be around to see it. Lucius then just walked away, not even bothering to watch his final moments. His breathing slowed and his eyelids flickered as the sky grew darker with each breath. The light was dying with him, he thought, as though the world marked his passing by drawing a curtain across the day and ushering him into the final darkness with honor. Solomon closed his eyes as a final tear fell to the ground. Ferris Manus is sulking, sequestered away in his iron forge, super depressed after fighting with Fulgrim for obvious reasons. Gabriel Santar, who somehow survived being torn open by Julius Caesarion, is also there, trying in vain to cheer his Primarch up, bringing Ferris fresh news from Terra. But unfortunately, it's not Good news, all across the Imperium, war was raging. Many Imperial commanders had declared for Horus, and that would be bad enough, but even the Mechanicum had been drawn into a civil war. Things aren't looking super hot right now. Santar also brings word from Ferris's brother Primarch Rogel Dorn, saying that it seems like the only traitor legions are the ones that fought alongside the War Master on Ishvan III, and even now, many of the other Primarchs are mobilizing against Horus. Salamanders, Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, Word Bearers, Raven Guard, and Night Lords, including the Iron Hands. That's 7 entire legions. Ferris thinking that Horus doesn't stand a chance. Ferris then deciding to board his fastest ship to rush over to Ishvan V, where Horus has established his headquarters, and meet up with his brother's legions. With Santar saying that's a bad idea because he's gonna leave behind the majority of his legion, Ferris just saying, I don't care, I need to face him and destroy him to restore my honor and prove my loyalty. Of course, talking about Fulgrim. Ferris is afraid that his brothers will think that he's also a traitor along with Fulgrim, saying they will wonder what made Fulgrim risk such a dangerous gambit. Soon they will come to believe that perhaps he had a reason to think I would follow him into treachery. No, we will make all speed for the Ishvan system to wash away the stain of this dishonor in the blood of traitors. Aboard the Pride of the Emperor, Ostian Delafor had finally finished his sculpture of the Emperor of Mankind, marveling at his own work, but knowing in the coming weeks and months there would be flaws that only he could see that would become painfully apparent. But it was okay, because if an artist should ever feel that he could no longer better himself, then what was the point of being an artist? And then Fulgrim entered. You have certainly captured him, causing Ostian to jump and spin around. I remember him like this, said Fulgrim. Ostian heard a note of sadness in the Primarch's voice. That was many years ago, of course. He looked like that at Ulanor, but that's not how I remember him on that day. He was cold then, aloof even. Fulgrim then erupting in anger, mad that Ostian would dare to carve a statue of the Emperor, telling Ostian that the Emperor is no longer the master of the galaxy. Ostian backing up into the statue, terrified, with Fulgrim circling it and him like a predator. Your work is not yet perfect, Ostian, said Fulgrim from behind the statue. Fulgrim then impales the sculpture, the blade emerging from Ostian's chest with a crack of bone. Now it's perfect. Later, Serena came to Ostian's studio, finally realizing that it was Ostian's love for her that had motivated him to help, cursing herself for not realizing it sooner. When she finally breaks into the studio, she is confronted by the grisly sight of Ostian's body impaled upon a glittering sword blade protruding from a wondrous sculpture of the Emperor, dropping to her knees before him, screaming, begging for him to forgive her. What remained of Serena's mind finally buckled and collapsed inwards at this latest atrocity. She pushed herself to her feet and placed her hands on Ostian's shoulders. You loved me, she whispered, and I never saw it. Serena closed her eyes and wrapped her arms around Ostian's corpse, feeling the sharp tip of the sword between her breasts. But I loved you too, she said, and pulled herself hard onto the sword blade. In La Fenice, Bekwakinska puts on a heathenistic concert. As the concert raged on, bloody violence erupted in the crowd, everyone writhing around in pleasure and pain. There were all manner of horrors enacted throughout the audience, as friends turned and fought each other with fists and teeth. Some audience members fell upon each other with carnal lust, and the heaving crowd soon resembled a great wounded beast, convulsing in agonized throes of death and desire. An orgy of killing spread from the stage, blood running in rivers as the power of the music thundered through La Fenice. Astartes clubbed mortals to death with their fists and drank their blood or ate their flesh, scarring their skin with the broken bones and draping the torn skin of their victims about them like grisly shawls. During all this madness, we actually get to see Marius start to become one of the first Noise Marines, so that's fun. The 3 Primarchs, Ferris Manus of the Iron Hands, Vulcan of the Salamanders, and Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard gather together on the bridge of the Ferrum. They are ready to attack, but are still waiting on the Word Bearers, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, and Alpha Legion. Ferris convincing his brothers to start the attack without them, saying that the traitors are not expecting them to attack so soon, and since the other legions are only a few hours away, they can reinforce them as soon as they get there. So they make planetfall and attack. Ferris and his men taking the vanguard, Corax and his legion taking the right flank, with Vulcan and his men on the left. Ferris Manus was a god of war, smashing traitors to the ground with blows from his shimmering fists, or blasting them apart with an ornately crafted pistol of enormous caliber. The mighty figure of Vulcan strode through the torrents of bolts, killing with every sweep of his sword. Corax darted like a bird of prey, leaping through the air with his winged jump pack and killing with every stroke of his mighty talons. But for every success, the traitors thus far had an answer. The terrifying form of the World Eater's Primarch cut through hundreds of loyal Astartes as they tried to force a crossing through a killing zone of World Eater support squads. Angron bellowed like a primordial god of battle, his twin swords carving bloody ruin through any who dared stand before him. As easily as the traitors died at the blades of Corax, Ferrus Manus, and Vulcan, so too did the loyalists die at those of the Red Angel. In contrast to the brutal savagery of Angron, Mortarion, the Death Lord, killed with grim efficiency, harvesting scores of loyalist lives with every sweep of his terrifying war scythe. Where the traitor Primarch stood, none could live. Julius Caesron is dancing around the battlefield, slaughtering Iron Hands who he once regarded as brothers, kissing the cold dead lips of one of his victims. But then Gabriel Santar comes upon him and they fight. During their fight, Julius takes an explosion to the face. His face a screaming burnt horror of seared flesh and exposed bone. But then Santar notices that Julius wasn't screaming in pain, but in orgasmic pleasure, his revulsion giving Julius an opening, tearing his blade up through Santar's groin, tearing through his pubis and ripping into his breastplate. Santar's entire body convulsing in agony. Even amid the thunder of battle and with his lips burned away, Julius's next words were horribly clear to Santar as his life slipped away.
"Thank you,"
gurgled Julius.
"That was exquisite."
And then, all of a sudden, hundreds of Stormbirds and Thunderhawks roared towards the surface, their armored hulls gleaming as the power of another 4 legions came to Istvan. Their heroic names legendary, their mighty deeds known the length and breadth of the galaxy. Alpha Legion, Word Bearers, Night Lords, Iron Warriors. We cut back to Ferrus, who finally finds what he was looking for ever since he set foot on Istvan 5, Fulgrim. Ferrus's brothers telling him not to do anything rash, but he doesn't listen and rushes off towards Fulgrim anyways. Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus then meet in their final battle. They have some back and forth, with Ferrus being like, "You betrayed me, you betrayed the Emperor," and Fulgrim being like, "No, I came to you out of friendship and brotherhood, you just don't understand." A lot of stuff like that. Fulgrim then telling Ferrus Manus that it doesn't really matter now anyways, because him and his legion are doomed. And then just being like, "Hey, look over there." And then Ferrus sees that the legions that were there to reinforce them weren't actually there to reinforce them. They were traitors as well. And they are opening fire on the Salamanders and the Raven Guard, slaughtering them. Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus fought with the weapons they both made for each other. Fulgrim with the hammer Forgebreaker, and Ferrus Manus with the recently reforged Fireblade. Ferrus taking a blow on his skull and dropping to one knee, cutting a wound across Fulgrim's stomach. Both Primarchs now facing each other on their knees through a haze of pain and blood. In that moment, Fulgrim once again felt an ache of sadness well within him. The pain of his wounds and the sight of his brother's broken skull coated in blood tore a window into his mind. "My brother," he whispered. "My friend."
"You have long lost the right to call me friend,"
snarled Ferrus, pushing himself to his feet and staggering towards Fulgrim with Fireblade raised to smite him. As the sword was descending down, Fulgrim instinctually grabbed the layer blade from his waist, intercepting the blow. It looked like that wasn't going to be enough to stop Ferrus from delivering the killing blow, but then Fulgrim was flooded with diabolical strength. Fulgrim surging to his feet and hurling Ferrus Manus back, spinning and lashing out with his sword. The silver edge bit deep into the breastplate of his brother's armor. Hot blood sprayed from the wound, and Fireblade slid from Ferrus's hand as he gasped in fierce agony.
"Finish him! Kill him!"
The voice in Fulgrim's head screamed. Fulgrim stood above Ferrus Manus, his chest heaving convulsively as his entire body shook with the violence of the power that sought to claim him.
"He must die, otherwise he will kill you."
As he looked down into his brother's eyes, he saw the reflection of what he had become and what monstrous betrayal he had allowed himself to be party to. He knew in that eternal moment that he had made a terrible mistake in drawing the sword from the layered temple, and he fought to release the damnable blade that had brought him so low. His grip was locked onto the weapon, and even as he recognized how far he had fallen, he knew that he had come too far to stop. The realization, coupled with the knowledge that everything he had striven for had been a lie, as though moving in slow motion, Fulgrim saw Ferrus Manus reaching for his fallen sword, his fingers closing around the wire-wound grip, the flames leaping once more to the blade at its creator's touch.
"Kill him now before he kills you. Now!"
Fulgrim's blade seemed to move with a life of its own, but it had no need for such impellence, for he swung the blade of his own volition. The silver blade clove the air as it swept towards Ferrus Manus, and Fulgrim felt the ancient triumph of the presence that he now knew had dwelt within it all this time. He tried desperately to pull the blow, but his muscles were no longer his own to control. Unnatural, warp-forged steel met the iron flesh of a Primarch, its apparent edge cutting through Ferrus's skin, muscle, and bone with a shrieking howl that echoed in realms beyond those knowable to mortals. Having decapitated his brother, Fulgrim's freaking out, being like, what have I done? Oh, throne, what have I done? With the Lair Blade saying, well, he did what needed to be done. You killed him with your own hand. Fulgrim saying, he was my brother. The Blade taunting him, saying, he was, and all he ever did was honor you too. Fulgrim, overcome with sadness and grief, just wants oblivion. He wants it all to end. With the Demon Sword saying, hey, I can do that for you. Open yourself up to me and I'll put an end to it all for you. With Fulgrim being like, damn, okay, that sounds actually pretty good. Do it. End me. As soon as the barriers in Fulgrim's mind dropped, the creature pounced, and Fulgrim knew his mistake. His consciousness was crushed into the dark, unused corners of his mind, forever to be a mute witness to the havoc wrought by his body's new master. One moment Fulgrim was a Primarch, one of the Emperor's children, and next he was a thing of chaos. Very few of the loyalist Astartes were able to escape, and within hours the slaughter was complete, and almost the entire strength of 3 complete legions lay silent and dead on the tortured sands of Istvan V. Fulgrim later requested a private audience with Horus, who could immediately detect a subtle difference in his brother's tone. Fulgrim presenting Ferrus Manus' head to the War Master. Horus soon figuring out that the person in front of him wasn't quite Fulgrim. The demon telling Horus that his brother was too weak and he had given him peace. Horus angrily asking if Fulgrim was dead, with the demon saying, oh no, I'm not gonna let him die. His cries of horror are of great comfort to me. Horus then making a silent vow to free his brother as soon as he was able to, for no one deserved to endure such a terrible fate. The demon inside Fulgrim returned to La Fenice on the pride of the Emperor, looking up at a wonderful painting of Fulgrim, where before the image had been a garish rot of colors with a terrible aspect that horrified those mortals who dared look upon it. It was now a thing of beauty. The painted Fulgrim stared down upon the ruin of the theater and the monster that had claimed his mortal shell. The demon smiled as it saw the horror within his eyes, a horror that had not been rendered by any skill of the painter. Perfect, exquisite agony burned in the portrait's gaze, and as the demon sheathed the anatheme and bowed to the silent stage, the dark pools of its painted eyes seemed to follow its every movement. The demon turned from the portrait and made its way from the theater as the last of the footlights guttered and died, leaving the last phoenix forever shrouded in darkness. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Warhammer content. This has been Fulgrim. Thank you so much. Goblin out.